everyone. Thank you for coming out and braving a dark and stormy evening. So we're really appreciative of your time to come out today. We'll have a new presentation. Can I see a show of hands who came to the last workshop? Repeat customers, we like it. Okay, so you'll know that this is part 2 in the series where we'll be discussing visitation, how many visitors do we expect, and then really talking about all the visitation management techniques and tools we've either built into the project already or have identified to implement over time and as needed. So that'll be today's show. There's a few folks in the room I just wanted to note. From Phillipstown, we have Jason Angel and Supervisor John Van Tassel in the room. I see that. And from Nelsonville, Mayor Chris Winward. I saw you walk in. There you are. Cold Spring, we have trustees Laura Bazzi and Eliza Starbuck right up here. Putnam County Legislator Nancy Montgomery in the front row. And I know she's probably not here yet, but Linda Cooper is on her way, and Evan Thompson is here from State Parks. So thank you all. And I didn't introduce myself, but I'm Amy Casal. I'm the Executive Director of Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail. And let's get going. Oh, yeah. So we have staff in the room from Fjord Trail and board members. So maybe if every staff member and board member can stand up. If you can look around and see, some of them are outside in the other room where you came in. But we'll stay around at the end of the presentation. In case you have any questions, you can find one of us. The consultants will also stay on hand as we did last time. So if you have questions that we don't get to when we do the Q&A session, we'll be around for you to talk with us afterward. So what did we see at the last workshop? Some key takeaways. So again, that first workshop covered the alternatives analysis, and I think the big reveal, in addition to walking through all of the alternatives we have reviewed, is that there's a new idea for a new alternative, which we will also be exploring. So that work is almost ready to start, and we'll have that, I think, over the summer to share how that pans out. We also looked at the shoreline trail design. That's at 30% design. And what does that mean? Well, right now we know that about half of it stays on the ground, on a gravel surface, that there's different areas for benches and overlooks and moments to stop and pause. I loved seeing the votes come in on Mentimeter last time, a tool we'll use this evening that really showed people liked that solid wood fencing that could be built in to create a little bit more separation between the train and your experience on the trail. So we'll explore that moving forward. And then just all of the things Gina from SCAPE talked about last time about the resilience and habitat and care that we're taking with the landscape and the vegetation that goes in on that space. So that was the last meeting. And the video is up on the Fjord Trail website if you wanted to review that and watch it again, or if you missed it and you want to go back and watch that, that is available. So tonight, what are we doing? Well, we'll do the same kind of intro to the background of the project as we did last time, but this time we want to focus on visitation projections and visitation management tools, and then provide opportunities for your feedback on the route and the design, and so we have another Mentimeter for that. And so I just wanted to note up front, visitation projections. This is an art and a science, and we've brought in Orca, who you'll meet this evening, to work on that. We also have work with a visitation data committee that was created months ago, and it has representatives from Nelsonville, Cold Spring, and Phillipstown, and Beacon, and Fishkill, all on there. And they've been working through some of the data as well. So I just want to acknowledge we're going to share the number today, but that data committee has already reviewed it. They're still talking about that, but this is the number we feel comfortable with. Maybe it changes a little bit. I think that doesn't impede the discussion of the visitation management tools, which is really, I think, seeing how all that comes together. So just with that caveat and recognition of that committee's hard work, got one in the front row here. So we just want to let everybody know that so there's no confusion. All right, and now I'll hand it over to Ona from CBI.
Thank you, Amy. Evening, everyone. Really nice to be here and see so many faces from last time. I'm Ona Ferguson from the Consensus Building Institute, and I'm going to figure out how far to stand from the mic so you can hear me. We have a 2-hour meeting planned for this evening, and we're going to break the content into 2 primary subject areas. The first is we'll do a little brief history that Amy will do, and then we'll do visitation projections, so number of visits today to the area and anticipated in the future with some different contexts around that. And there will be a presentation, time for clarifying questions. That's what you have your cards for. And then the second part is around tools and strategies for managing visitors and visits so that it works as well as it can and everyone can have a good experience. People who live here all the time, people who visit here. Both, and we'll talk about those tools. We'll do, again, clarifying questions and then ask for your input on some questions around that. We'll wrap up officially at 8. If it's like last time, people will stay and hang out and come up and talk to the consultants and learn more about anything you want to learn more about after, kind of casually up here. So that's the plan for the evening. Thank you for being here on such a rainy day. We're happy we have a dry, warm space we can be in together. I can advance this. We have are naming just a few ground rules, which are essentially just help us move through these topics, listen to each other, be respectful, and share your input honestly. We're happy to have you here with us. There are a lot of wonderful materials related to this project on the project website. If you haven't been there, check it out. It's great. And I'm going to say this now just to give you a preview for anyone who wasn't here last time. We got through a lot of your questions last time because we took them in writing and then just asked them and moved through as efficiently as we could. We're going to do the same thing this time, so you have cards. Think of your biggest question that you want to ask whoever gave the presentation and write that one and turn it at, one after one presentation, one after the other. And we'll be reading, questions that are questions and are on topic about that presentation piece so that we can get as deep into the substance that we're talking about in this evening as we can. We will also be doing, again, a Mentimeter for those who were here last time, but it's on your phone. And for anybody who has a hard time with the technology, we have paper versions, so you can just let us know if that's causing you trouble. We think we solved maybe the Wi-Fi and made it better and faster. So for those of you who were here last time and were like, it's a little clunky and a little slow, we think it'll be faster. And you can check your phone if you feel like it now and see if you have bars of service. And if you don't, you can get onto the Wi-Fi now, but I'll also tell you how to more later. And I think, is the next slide have it too? No. So that's there. I'll leave that for a second and Amy can start talking, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
So just a quick overview. There's always new faces in the room, so I'm sorry for those who it's repetitive. I'll try to make it a little different than last time. So just a reminder, the project has been in some state of planning for about 17 years now. It started with community groups like Phillipstown Greenway, Little Stony Point Citizens Association, and New Jersey Trail Conference. Minds sitting around a table thinking about the danger on 90 and how do we deal with this and kind of make that a safer experience for people. Lots of planning and growing since then, including growing a coalition. There's a complex landscape here. You have 4 communities, 2 counties, a lot of state and agency-owned land, and so it has created this cast of characters that we work with through the project. The project has also changed over time, so it's not the same as it was in 2006, and it's not the same as it was in 2015, and we are still listening and adjusting to conditions that change on the ground. So the most recent big change was between a master plan and an update, which really counted in the changing visitation locally. That meant more management techniques were needed. COVID pandemic, which had a lot of changes for us in terms of work-life balance, more people able to come on a weekday than they were able before with flexible work schedules, and so that all changed patterns on the ground as well. And a focus that we put into the project more leaning into equity and accessibility. Just a little bit about who we are, because this gets confused often, but we are an independent nonprofit established in 2020. So it was March of 2020, and I'll remember because it was literally like 3 days before the pandemic started. So we're an independently managed subsidiary of Scenic Hudson. So they're the parent company umbrella, but we fundraise ourselves and we operate as an independent nonprofit. Right now we have a 7-person board and 8-person staff, and that will grow over time as we go towards operations. And why? So what are we built for? Why do we exist? We are here to build and then maintain and operate the trail. So the emptying of the garbage and the, weeding along the way, that would be our staff. Like I said, we've been evolving based on what we hear, and we're always out in different modes and methods, gathering information from people, getting ideas. So that could be at the recent Maple Syrup Day where we were, or the same day we had one of our chats at Hudson, at the lodge. So we had a fire that time. That was good too. So it's always just different ways people can come and ask us. Some of those meetings have an agenda. Other times it's just being available for questions or sharing maps and materials. The vision is for a 7.5-mile ADA trail that connects the communities of Cold Spring and Beacon to the Hudson Highlands State Park Preserve and the existing trails and park spaces in that preserve today. We have a master plan. We are in the process of the environmental review, and I'll just note with curiosity, there's 2 gentlemen at the table to the left. They are from AKRF, who's working on our environmental review. So if there's some questions tonight that go in the realm of the environmental review, they can answer those. So that's about to wrap up. We expect to have a public review draft available in hopefully June, if there's no more shifts in schedule. And that will be widely announced, so you'll know when that is available for public review and comment. And then there will be a public hearing that will be hosted and announced by OPRHP as the lead agency, so you can expect that. And these sessions are really designed to help kind of make sure everyone feels informed about the project, because we know that's going to be a lot to digest. The environmental review, so the whole project is a draft. It's iterative. We can change it over time, and it's really not final until it gets through environmental review and all the design development work. So we can continue to refine. We hear that a lot. Well, you have it in the master plan. Isn't that what you're just going to do? And the answer is it's a guideline, right? So, but the details of surveying and really inventorying and coming up with a site plan, whole different conversation, lots of opportunities for input in the early design development process. And that's here. So there's many steps in it. So when you're in concept 30, you have lots of opportunity to provide input on the design and shape that design. Once you get to 80% CDs, your construction drawings, you're really worrying about how you're fixing the railing to the thingamajiggy, right? So it's a little bit more detailed, less opportunity for creativity. And important to note, and this kind of factors into the conversation today, this is not going to be built and then opened all in one shebang, right? This is going to be built over time, starting in the middle with phase 1, which has breakneck and the visitor center, the shuttles starting to operate, all of that component, and then starting work heading towards the south before starting work heading to the north. But really in time, the work to the south takes a while. We might actually finish those 2 pieces at the same time. It's just they would start at different times. Okay, so that's the overview. Now I will hand it over to John. Moss from Orca Consulting, who's going to just give us a little bit of an overview on visitation management as a practice before we get into the nitty-gritty.
Thank you very much. Great. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Gosh, I know it's taking up a lot of your evening time and also to come out in the elements like it is, but we really, really appreciate it. Can everybody hear me okay? Perfect. Yeah, I don't think I've ever been accused of having an inside voice, so I don't think it's going to be an issue tonight. But again, thank you, everyone. I wanted to find out first, before we get started, how many of you had an opportunity to see the 2 separate videos that were posted on the Fjord web? Wow, that's great. Terrific. Thank you. So I think this really helps kind of prep you, to ground you into the conversations that we're having tonight. For those of you who hadn't had the opportunity to view those yet, don't worry. We'll be covering most of that information tonight. And for those of you who did, don't worry. This is kind of like bonus features when a DVD comes out, that we've got some additional information that we'll be sharing with you this evening. So everybody's a winner. So that being said, let's talk about projections and management strategies for visitation. So I wanted to first start by just sharing with you who we are. Our firm is Orca Consulting, and that is an acronym. It stands for Operations Research Consulting Associates. Our expertise is in capacity and visitor flow planning and facility operations. It's not just planning, that we will also go in and assess existing operations. We are very data curious, and we're very visitor behavior curious. I love living in the trenches because I love investigating the who, what, when, where, how of how people move through a space. And so that really helps us to inform our recommendations. And we tend to focus on cultural venues, public facilities like the Fjord Trail and the surrounding neighboring communities. We work very often with the National Park Service, with the Smithsonian, zoos, aquariums, science centers, etc. The cultural attractions arena, the public venues have now increasingly become passionate about managing their own visitation. So they come to us on a fairly regular basis because, like what's going on here in the planning of the Fjord Trail, they want to make sure it's done right, respectfully, for the community, for the natural spaces, and for the experience and the safety of those that are coming. So what we'll cover in this conversation tonight is what is visitation management, what visitation is projected for the Fjord Trail, when and then where will that attendance be happening, what visitation management is part of the Fjord Trail plan. This is my fun part. I get to share with you some of the strategies that we've been recommending, and then what other additional visitation management tools is Fjord Trail able to implement as needed. All right, sounds good? Shall we? Let's go. All right, so we'll talk about visitation management. It is, by definition, it's a collection of systems, processes, policies. When we use them together, they complement each other in reaching visitor management goals. So it's a toolkit, and as you'll learn, there's a variety of categories that we use in the toolkit, but ultimately it's a balancing supply and demand. We don't want attendance to ever outpace the ability of a park or a trail to support it. And why does visitation management matter for a trail? First, it protects the landscape. Second, it protects adjacent communities from overburden. And ultimately, it assures the experience is safe and enjoyable. And quite frankly, I mean, I look at this as like a three-legged stool in terms of prioritizing things, that if you've ever heard the three-legged stool analogy, they all have to have equal length, because if one's given more priority over the others, then the stool can't stand. So as we approach a project like this, and we come to the Fjord Trail team with recommendations, that we're doing this making sure there is proper balance in place. Is visitation management only focused on visitors? I'm going to tell you, no. There's so much more. And as you can see, these are things that I know you're wanting to make sure are, that we have our hands wrapped around and that is built into the plan to make sure that those issues are addressed. It includes strategies to protect against the impact on neighboring communities, such as parking, garbage, crowding, bathrooms, traffic congestions, and natural resources. I will tell you, I took those top 2 pictures, and I will tell you the first one that I took was the one in the upper right. And I can tell you, and this was our first visit. It was capturing visitation both within Cold Spring and then along the trail areas over Memorial Day weekend. And one of the first things that I did was to stand on the platform to count arrivals on the Metro North. And I will tell you, I immediately felt empathy for what you all need to make sure is properly managed when you look at, what's coming at you. And quite frankly and selfishly, there were other data collectors that were on our team that were intending to rotate through Cold Spring. I selfishly wanted to stay within Cold Spring because I knew that there was pain that was really felt most strongly in that community there, to see what's happening on the village. So over and over and over again, it was important for me to see what was happening in Cold Spring. The trash picture, I've seen the lines for the restrooms, so I completely understand what we've been up against. So how does visitation management work? Well, it's a dynamic process, and it's really a cycle. It's not one and done. And there's a layer of tools that we use to both proactively on an as-needed basis. Let's follow the cycle. We'll start up at the top center. So first, we understand what behaviors are happening on the ground. Like I said, being here on site, collecting all the data. Then next, it's understanding what the desired conditions are. Where do we want to land at? Then it's developing strategies to bring the behaviors in line with the desire. And then come opening is to implement them, but then you don't walk away, then you monitor them. So my friend Drew, where's Drew at? Hi, Drew. So Drew is, as we, hand off our recommendations to him, he and his team will be monitoring visitation as the trail is open, and then there's a review and improvement process to then loop back to the top again. So it's a great cycle. The beauty of it is that this is following a pattern that was established by the National Park Service and an interagency committee to draw on the lessons from all around the globe. It was developed, as I said, by the Interagency Visitor Use Management Council, the IVUMC, and that was in 2011. And it was designed as a best practices visitor use management on federally managed lands. And it's a 4-phased approach in their model to aid venues in developing their own visitation management plans. A lot of best practice sharing, so a lot of the recommendations that we have made for the Fjord Trail do follow a lot of the tried and true best practices that have been out there. And the Fjord Trail is incorporating the IVUMC framework in its planning efforts, among other tools that will be used to establish these visitation management strategies. So what are some examples of effective visitation management tools? There's a couple of main buckets. So there are indirect techniques, such as info and education programs, the physical design solutions like wayfinding and trip planning and traveler information. These are meant to influence behavior. On the other hand, you have more direct techniques. Those are things like the timed entry and reservation systems, zoning, and managing types of use. For example, on the Fjord Trail, the main path of the Fjord Trail is intended to be bike-friendly, but the meanders and the connectors, those will not. And they'll be signed accordingly, and Druta's team will be monitoring to make sure that those behaviors are in place. So those are more direct techniques versus the indirect techniques. You'll find as we get further into the discussion, I'm more of a fan of indirect techniques as a first approach because I think those do allow for a greater sense of freedom. When you come to a park, you want to feel free. So a lot of what we're recommending is to help people plan better, to encourage them to do things using those regulations only when it's appropriate. And a successful visitation management strategy requires thoughtful planning, understanding existing conditions, identifying the desired capacity. Super important because of the proximity for the neighboring communities to the Fjord Trail, collaboration among project partners and neighboring municipalities, and a willingness and ability to adapt to changing conditions. So I just want to show you an example of how we come into these types of projects to apply visitation management. And in this case here, it was a project that we worked on with the National Park Service's Muir Woods location. How many people have been to Muir Woods? Yeah, beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, but depending on the time that you went, that it was either horribly crowded outside of the entry to the space, or it was well managed. And so we'll talk about the impact on the adjacent community of Mill Valley. The problem that they had there, which I know we have all been feeling in this area here, is that increasing attendance levels starting in the early 2000s brought a flood of visitors arriving by car, and that parking cascading into the neighborhood streets in Mill Valley. And of course that leads to pedestrian and motorist safety issues, which obviously you've also been seeing here. And of course, along with that, the threat to natural resources. So what was the approach in addressing this particular situation? The National Park Service contracted Orca, and we had a two-pronged strategy to address this over-visitation and the increased demand in the parking lots and at the entry to the park. One was to get a parking reservation system established, and two was to have a shuttle service implemented that would shuttle visitors to and from these off-site parking lots, these intercept lots in dedicated areas. So what was our process in going through this project? We first evaluated existing conditions. So akin to what Orca has been doing here since May of 2023, it was doing a lot of field research to examine those existing conditions and then pull on historical data to go with that. And then to quantify from pulling that information together what the on-site parking needs should be, and then what should the shuttle fleet requirements should be, as well as service frequencies. How often should the shuttles come? How many should they peak at on a busy day, et cetera. So from an implementation point of view, so those of you who raised your hands and said you've been there, you may have followed this very guidance. So now, even to this day, when you visit Muir Woods, there's a couple of ways that you're able to come into that national park. You either reserve a parking space, or you reserve a seat on the Muir Woods shuttle. And one of those two is required in order to visit the park. The results from this is that there's been a 28% increase in the portion of visitors taking the shuttle instead of their own car or other transportation. So it's that modal shift. It's pulling those vehicles off of the road. And then environmental benefits include a 14% reduction in pounds of CO2 equivalent per visitor to Muir Woods. Additional results are an improvement in the conditions in the neighboring Mill Valley by pulling that traffic demand off of the roadways, creating safer, less congested access road conditions, and ultimately for the visitors, increasing visitor satisfaction, 96% positive experience. Because I can tell you, if you came to Muir Woods before this system was in place, it was a bet as to whether you were going to be able to find a place to park, legally or illegally. And now every visitor that comes to Muir Woods has the confidence that they'll either have a place to park or they'll have a seat on the shuttle to bring them up to the park. All right, so that's it for a little introduction to the process of visitation management. Ona, shall I pass it back to you?
I think
I'm going to give it to Al.
to Al. Sure. Yeah.
All right, very good. And I'll be back in a little bit. Al's going to talk now about attendance specifically, but then I want to come back and then share some of the visitation management techniques that we've recommended for the Fjord Trail. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Well, John's shared with you the visitation management techniques that we're incorporating with the development of Fjord Trail. But to implement those techniques, we really have to have an understanding of what the visitation levels are that we need to be planning for. So that's what I'll be talking about. What are the visitation levels now, and what will they be in the future? First step that we need is to really have an understanding of the dynamics of who is visiting today and how they are moving around. So to get that, we really needed to make sure we had enough data to start with to do the planning and the modeling to project out what's needed. So we started with data that was already here. There was a lot of good data that was available to us. We had the New York, New Jersey steward data for Breakneck Trail. We had data from the National Park Service on parks in the eastern U.S. We had the data for Walkway over the Hudson, the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. We also looked at some specific venues that had really good data on daily data that enable us to do a detailed analysis, and that was Susquehanna Riverwalk and Buffalo Valley Trail. And we also were able to use the hiker survey that was conducted in 2022 of 600 hikers and their zip codes. We recognized that we had some data gaps. We needed to go in and collect some data ourselves to fill in the blanks, essentially. So last year we started between Memorial Day and the end of October. We came over and did a number of field observations, looking at how people were moving around. We collected data, we counted people. We collected what we call PAOT counts, and that's an acronym for people at one time. It's a snapshot of people in one area at one point in time. We also collected flow counts, how many people are moving through specific areas on an hour period of time. And then we implemented an online survey where we continuously surveyed visitors. We had 400 respondents, and we got some really good data that helped us understand visitor demographics and visitation demographics. To begin with, we want to understand how many people use the parks and trails along the Fjord Trail corridor today. So to really answer that question, we need to define a couple of terms that we use in the presentation and within our analysis. First is what we refer to as the Fjord Trail corridor. And this is the area essentially between Cold Spring and Beacon along the Hudson that includes popular trails and parks within the Greater Hudson Highlands State Park Preserve. We also have the overall Hudson Highlands State Park Preserve that's a much larger area. It has over 8,000 acres, and it consists of separate parcels of land stretching from Peekskill to Beacon. And when we look at the Fjord Trail corridor itself, it is just a small percentage of that total 8,000 acres, although it does experience a good percentage of the overall visitation. The Fjord Trail corridor consists of parks and trails. So we have 4 major trailheads, Notch, Wilkinson, Breakneck Ridge, and Washburn. These connect to other trails, but these are the major trailheads that are in the corridor. We also have 5 individual parks. We have Long Dock, Dennings Point, Madam Brett, Little Stony Point, and Dockside Park. So when the Fjord Trail is built, it will be connected to all of these locations and provide a convenient way for people to move about between these popular destinations. When we look at the visitation in 2023, we did an analysis going back to all that data that we showed you and came up with estimates of what the annual visitation is for the overall and for the individual locations. So when we look at all of these individual locations along the Fjord Trail corridor, we estimate a total annual visitation of 433,200, and it's spread out nicely across the different parks and trails, but we do see the major concentration towards the south end. Washburn's actually the highest that we measured at 113,000, followed closely by Breakneck Trail. But we also have a lot of visitation at Little Stony Point and Dockside Park. And when you look at those three areas there, that accounts for almost half of the total visitation in the corridor is on the south end. So that kind of helps back up the concerns that people have of significant visitation and crowding levels within Cold Spring. Then the next step, after we've looked at the overall distribution of visitors, we want to focus in on those heavy utilized areas like the village and understand the patterns and the drivers of visitation. What is making the visitation tick in that particular area. So we spent a lot of time looking at that in significant detail. What we're going to get into is talking about how we developed computer-based models to represent the movement of people through the village of Cold Spring. To do that, we need to understand why people are visiting. Well, we've got leisure, casual visitors that are just coming for a relaxing experience. We have hikers that are looking for a more vigorous experience. So there's a lot of whys on why people are visiting the area and broken down into those individual components. How people are arriving, what are the travel modes, how are they distributed between those different travel modes. We want to understand when people are arriving. So we've got a high seasonality here, as everyone knows. So we've got low seasons, we've got the peak season, and the super peak season, which is a peak day during the fall foliage season. And we also have peak days of the week. Everyone's coming on the weekend, or half of the people are coming on the weekends. And we have a distribution over the time of the day. So as we'll see in a little bit, we've got a very unique distribution on how people are coming by time of the day as well. And then what are they doing once they get here? There's a whole myriad of activities. There's a lot of different routes that people take on their day's experience. So those can be categorized into major categories, which we have done in our analysis, and which we'll show you part of in a little bit here. One thing to recognize is that not everyone that comes to Cold Spring are hikers. In fact, the hikers is a small portion. We actually did an analysis of people that were on Main Street, divided them into hikers versus non-hikers. And what we found is that almost 2/3 of the people are non-hikers. A little bit over 1/3 are hikers, but that's still a very significant amount, and one that we feel with the planning for Fjord Trail, we have the most opportunity to impact and reduce essentially in Cold Spring, as we'll see in a bit. Where are the visitors to Main Street coming from? Well, we've got a distribution between local visitors and distant visitors. And we, in our analysis, we consider the local visitors to be from the three neighboring counties, Putnam, Dutchess, and Orange counties. So essentially, we had a little bit over 1/3 were local visitors, and 2/3 were distant visitors. So even though the bulk of the visitation is distant, we do have a large representation from the local area. So the visitation to Cold Spring and to this area is a significant amount of it is local visitors. Another interesting fact, when we analyzed our survey data, we were able to break down the visitors into hikers and non-hikers and look at how they arrive by travel mode. And it's interesting to see that For the non-hikers, they actually were predominantly arriving by car. For hikers, they're down to 55%, so hikers and non-hikers have a lot higher probability of taking their cars. When we look at the people that come on the trains, the hikers actually had twice the percentage that arrived on train as compared to the hikers. As compared to the non-hikers. So we see that there's a very big gap in the difference in the distributions there, and that's something that we can take advantage of in our planning for Fjord Trail. When we look at the overall Hudson Highlands State Park, which is the large area that we discussed, and break down that visitation into the individual components, we have a total annual visitation of almost 520,000. About half of that is parks and trails that are outside of the Fjord Trail category, and about half of that are the parks and trails in the Fjord Trail corridor, with the largest portions being Washburn Trail and Breakneck Ridge Trail. Excuse me, could I have my water for a second?
Yeah.
Getting a little dry here.
There you go.
Thanks. And we want to understand who our current users are. Well, the major categories of users to the Hudson Highlands area, we have hikers, and they're coming from nearby, they're coming from far away, and many of them are accessing their trailhead through Cold Spring. So that's why we see a lot of them show up on the streets. We've got a lot of locals that come and join the nearby parks, a lot of them at Dockside, a lot of them at Long Dock, and as we see here, a lot of them at Little Stony Point, enjoying the beach and the trail at Little Stony Point. We have cyclists that come from nearby and far away, and as we know, they can create traffic congestion especially on Highway 9D. And then we have people that are coming specifically for shopping and dining. Again, those come from nearby and far away as well. So now, when we look at all this data we've gathered, in some ways it seems almost overwhelming. How do we integrate all this and see how it translates into conditions on the ground? So what we felt we needed to do was take a look at what conditions are like on a very peak day in Cold Spring. And on that peak day, what does the peak hour look like? So this essentially what we're going to be looking at will be the peak fall foliage day that occurs in October. We looked at visitation by month of the year, and this is the average distribution, looking at a number of years to get this distribution. So we see that the peak months occur in September and October, very close, with October being the highest, and these percentages represent percent of the annual attendance. So 17% occurs in October, another 15% in September. But when we look at the rest of the year, we see that there's a lot of months that are much lower, corresponding to much more comfortable conditions within Cold Spring. And what we want to do strategy-wise is to try to push as many people as we can from those peak months into the non-peak months. We also have peaking by day of the week. As we know, the weekends are the busiest, and here's some statistics to back that up. We have just about 50% of our visitation falling on weekend days, with the other 50% spread out over the weekdays. So since Saturday and Sunday are always the busiest, one of our strategies is going to be how do we shift people from those peak weekend days into the weekdays. And we've got peaking by time of the day. So what we saw was a very different distribution in visitation between people that use the trails and people that use the parks. So as we see here, for the trail visitors, they start off very high with at the 8 to 9 a.m. hour, the 23% of the daily visitation, and that drops off steadily throughout the course of the day. Then for the park visitors, we have the opposite distribution. They start off very low in the morning, continually building up, so the peak time is in the mid to late afternoon period. It's 19% of the daily visitation for the parks. Going back to that, this difference is something that we can take advantage of in our planning and try to encourage a shift of people from the peak times into the non-peak times through visitation management. We're going to be showing you an animated simulation. So the first thing I want to do is introduce the concept of what is an animated simulation. Since we have all this data that's difficult to put together, animated simulation is a tool that enables us to incorporate a lot of different decision-making factors, put them into a model, and visualize what the outcome is. So the model is a dynamic model that shows the movement and interaction of people in a particular space over a defined time period. And we've used this on really a lot of our projects because what we deal with is visitation in all of our projects. So we found it to be a very useful tool, and I think what you'll see in a few minutes here is that it's very useful for looking at the conditions in Cold Spring. It's a predictive tool to test the impact of future changes, and we'll be looking at first existing conditions, but then how things change in future years. As we said, for the Cold Spring, we developed a simulation model of pedestrian movements, and it's all based upon the statistics we gathered last year, along with the existing data that was available to us. We're going to be showing 3 scenarios for Cold Springs simulation. We have a first scenario that looks at existing visitation on the peak day. We have a second scenario that looks at what visitation will be like in 10 years in 2033 without Fjord Trail. And then finally, what does conditions look like in 2033 with Fjord Trail when it's fully built out? Before we actually show you the simulation, I want to give you a little explanation of what you're going to be seeing in the simulations. In the upper right corner, we've got a little title that tells you what the scenario is and shows a clock. And that clock will show you the elapsed time. And keep in mind that when we look at this, the simulated time is actually about 15 times the real times. Otherwise, we'd be here until midnight. Again, we have the 3 Fjord Trail scenarios that we're going to be looking at. Whoops. In the simulation, we're going to be using dots to represent people. We have black dots that represent people that arrive by car or on foot, and these could be locals and other people that arrive by car. The red dots represent passengers that have arrived from the MNR, the Metro North, and the blue dots represent C-Streaks passengers. So in a minute, we'll see how they all arrive and converge within Cold Spring. And then finally, when we look at the simulation, we'll be seeing boxes pop up representing different areas of Cold Spring. In this example, we're looking at Main Street from the section between the train tracks and Fair Street, and it shows you again what we told you, the PAOT, the number of people there at one point in time. So this is an average over the course of the simulation, and we'll be looking at that in just a bit. So with all that said, let's take a look at what visitation looks like in the village today. let's go ahead and start that first simulation. Okay, here is our simulation of existing conditions in Cold Spring. So we see visitors moving around. A train has just arrived and dropped off 340 passengers, and they're mixing with the people that have arrived by car. Most of the red folks, along with some of the black dots, are moving up Fair Street on their way to Washburn Trail. We've got some people over here in Dockside Park. And when you see people here disappearing, they're actually going into the shops. So once they go into the shops, we didn't want to muddle up the simulation, so they'd disappear from the video. So now we see a simultaneous arrival of the train and the C streak. And now I'll give you a little bit of time to see how the C streak passengers, most of them make a beeline for Main Street and converge on the already crowded conditions. And as you'll see over time, we have a buildup of wait lines at the bathroom, along with some of the restaurants. So Main Street, the Main Street, we have an average count of 100. The average count for Fair Street is about 80 people at this time, and we'll compare that to future conditions in a minute. Lower Main Street, we're showing an average of 55 people.
And people can watch this again themselves in the recording once this is all posted.
Okay, real good. And then in Dockside Park, we're showing an average of 40 people. But as we discussed, in the future, we'll see these volumes changing. Already it's crowded. And that's what a lot of people are reacting to, the crowded conditions within Cold Spring.
What day of the week is this?
This is a busy weekend day during the October period, the peak fall foliage day. So we collected data over a large period of time, but for the simulation, we wanted to focus in on that absolute peak day to really emphasize what the conditions are.
Like of the
October, wasn't it 22nd? It's actually,
Yeah.
it's actually a kind of a compilation of different days because we had data from different days. So we kind of put those together to develop what we felt to be a peak situation. So if we took a snapshot of one day, it would be high in some areas, low in other areas. So we actually took the maximum of the values that we had from the different study periods.
Yeah, but to answer your question, I think the peak of those weekends that we looked at, I think was that third weekend. It's where the weather was most ideal. So we actually came back to gather data because we saw the weather pivoting, and we knew it was important for us to be present to see the conditions at that ultra-perfect weather day. So, yeah, I think that was a real win for us to be able to see that, to really help to study.
I just want to ask you to be mindful of time. I know people
Okay.
really want to see all,
Okay,
I want you
let's
to
move
tell
on.
the story clearly and also.
We haven't gotten to the good part yet, so let's go ahead and move on. So now, what would visitation look like in the future without Fjord Trail? So what we want to look at is 10 years in the future. One thing to look at is what have the trends been in the local parks and trails. If we look at Breakneck Ridge Trail, we actually see since 2016, it's had some peaks and valleys, but in actuality, in the last few years, it's actually dropped off quite a bit. And we think this is a result of lifting of the COVID restrictions. Also, what several people have commented on is that there seems to have been a shift from Breakneck over to Washburn Trail. But Breakneck itself has actually dropped, but we're not basing our future projection on Breakneck Ridge. When we look at the larger regional trends, we looked at several indicators, actually 5 different indicators and how their attendance has changed over the years. We started with the eastern U.S. national parks. That increased by 4% per year. Hudson Highlands State Parks Preserve has been increasing by 7.6%, and so on. So when we look at all our comparables together, the overall average is 4.7%. We developed, actually a range. We know we can't perfectly predict the future, so we developed a range of estimates from what we call a low-end estimate, and that's based upon population change in the counties that our visitors are coming from. We have a high-end estimate that's based upon the comparable parks and trails, and then our mid-level estimate is essentially the average of those two. So we see we have a range from about 400,000 to a little over 600,000 with an average of about 500,000. And here we see that again in a bar chart. Today we're estimating that we have about 433,000 annual attendance for the parks and trails adjacent to the Fjord Trail corridor. Without Fjord Trail, that would jump up by 18% to 511,500. And now we want to take a look at the second simulation, which incorporates the 18% increase. So all the patterns are the same, but the visitation level is increased by 18%. So as we see here, similar patterns, but things are actually busier throughout Cold Spring. When a train arrives, now instead of dropping off 340 passengers, it's dropping off 380 passengers. So we have an even bigger surge. The C Streak is constrained by an agreement with the city. It's 400 passengers, so that has not changed from existing levels. When we look at the black dots representing the car visitors, that also has gone up by 18%. And if you focus on the bathroom, you'll see that those levels are increasing as we go through the day. And so conditions you see out there today are going to get worse in the future. Main Street, the PAOT has jumped from 100 to 116. Fair Street from 80 to 87. Lower Main Street has gone up from 55 to 60. And Dockside Park has gone from 40 to 46. So conditions are quite a bit busier. With the do-nothing scenario, I think we can expect those to continue to grow in the future, along with growth in visitation and natural growth in parks and trails visitation.
This is the midpoint scenario? You had a low, high, and a middle?
Yes, we are representing the midpoint scenario.
In the next video. This is just future without Fjord.
Yeah, this was without Fjord Trail, so. Okay, so now the big thing that I think there's been a lot of discussion on in the community is how many new visitors will Fjord Trail draw to the area? First thing to consider is that visitation and visitors are not the same thing. And to illustrate that, we've got kind of a simple example here with three visitors to the Hudson Highlands area. First, we have Mike, who is an avid runner. He comes out and runs almost every day. Sometimes he gets lazy and takes a rest, but that one person is accountable for 313 visits per year. Then we have Sue, who's a sightseer that's not really planning to visit the trail that much, but when she has visitors in town, she'll go out to visit the trail. So Sue is another one person, generates 5 visits. Then we have Andy here, who's a weekend warrior. He comes every weekend and has an adventure on one of the trails. So one visitor Andy accounts for 52 visits. And when we add all those up, we see for these local residents that we have 3 visitors that are accountable for 370 annual visits. Now, that's in some ways an overstatement. These are exceptional cases, but in reality, we can go back through our surveys we conducted last year and say that for the locals in the Tri-County area, they averaged, each local that visited the area averaged 12 visits. If you look at the people that were distant visitors, each distant visitor accounted for 7 visits. So the overall average is 8.5. So when we look at the annual visitation that we're showing you, divide by 8.5, and that's close to the actual individual number of visitors, because people love the area and they come back often. So now with that in mind, how many new visitors will the trail add? Well, I have to understand that there's various components to the Fjord Trail visitation. We have components that don't add new visits. We have what we call captured visits, and that could be someone like a person a hiker that's going to Breakneck Trail. He gets off the Metro North, and he has to walk through Fjord Trail to get to his destination. So he's a captured visitor. He's not specifically coming for the trail, but he counts in the visitation anyway. We have add-on visits. These are people that are coming to visit, say, Long Dock Park, and while they're here, the trail entry is right next door, so I'm going to go there and explore what's in Fjord Trail. So it's someone that's adding on a visit to something they would have already done. We have shifted visits, people that would have done something such as somebody was planning to go to Mount Beacon Trail, but instead of that, I'll check out this new Fjord Trail. So instead of going to Mount Beacon, he comes to Fjord Trail. So those are all visitors that count in the Fjord Trail population, but do not contribute to new visitors. Then we have what are actually new visitors, and this consists of people in the existing visitor market that are going to increase their visitation frequency. Again, through our surveys last year, we saw that with the addition of Fjord Trail, people indicated that they would increase the number of times they visited per year. So part of this 205,000 is those people that increase their visitation frequency. Then we have additional visitors that are coming specifically because they've heard about the new Fjord Trail, and they generate new visits as well. So we see here that what our mid-range projection is for the Fjord Trail is 522,700, but 204,900 are actually new visits. The rest of them are these other components that do not add new visitation. And
I have a question. I'll ask a question.
yes, sir.
Where's open bar? Where's the
Oh, good question.
Where you told me there's an open bar here.
Okay, so now we've looked at the overall visitation. Now we're interested in finding out where that visitation will hit along the Fjord Trail corridor. So here again are the different locations where we have an entry to Fjord Trail. When we look at the new visitation, we're projecting new visitation of a little bit over 2,000 on a daily basis. We see that the bulk of that, actually 45%, is concentrated in the central area, and that's what we're referring to as the heart of the trail, because this area is being developed specific. Excuse me, another sip of water. This area is being developed specifically to draw people in and visit this area rather than aggravate the local communities and create additional visitation there. So when we look at Cold Spring It's additional visitation. We're projecting at just under 300 on that peak day.
Is that a medium projection for peak?
Yes, medium projection. So why have those changes occurred? Well, here are all the specific reasons. Because of the new infrastructure and management plans for Fjord Trail. We have the car arrivals, and we've got the new parking north of the village, over 350 new parking spaces that'll attract people in cars. We've got parking regulations in the village that will restrict non-resident parking. And we've got the management tools, including the online app and wayfinding that will make it clear and easy for people to get to the Fjord Trail parking areas. We've got a new visitor center that becomes a focal point, a destination, especially for non-local visitors and anyone that wants to come and decide how to plan their daily visit. We have a shuttle system, and that shuttle is designed to pick people up and drop them off at the trail stations and all of the trailheads. So now it'll be easy to get from point A to point B anywhere along the Fjord Trail system. The train arrivals. We're looking at significant improvements to the Metro North Station at Breakneck, and that, along with communication with the visitors, will encourage much higher use of the Breakneck and shift a lot of visitors. We're expecting about a 50% shift in train riders and hiker train riders from Cold Spring to Breakneck. We have a series of infrastructure and service improvements, and those that specifically impact the village include the fact that we're going to have 2 routes for people to choose from the village to get to the Fjord Trail. They can go through Dockside Park, or they can continue to go up Fair Street. So we're giving them a choice. We've got wayfinding signage that will direct people to where they want to go. And then we've got new public restrooms and garbage recycling bins that will ease the stress on business and services within Cold Spring. So with that in mind, with those changes, we incorporated that into our simulation model. And here's what the result looks like.
Can you hang up for can I have 1 sec? While you're seeing this, we're getting to the end of this part of the presentation. If you have a question about it, now is a great time to start jotting it down also. And if you write legibly, I can read your question more clearly. Thank you. Thanks, Al.
Okay, so here again, we've got the same Cold Spring simulation, but a lot fewer visitors, as you see, because we've pulled so many of them up towards the Fjord Trail entry points from the MNR and by automobile. So here, when we see a train pull in, instead of dropping off 380 passengers, it's dropping off half of that, 190 passengers. We still have a surge, but the surge is much mitigated by the shift in visitation to the Breakneck Station. And we see an improvement around the restroom. Right now, we're seeing no wait line. We'll still see wait lines form, but that'll become better. We've got the additional capacity of the restroom up at Dockside Park that will be an amenity to draw people.
This is starting the trailhead in Dockside? Yes.
It's coming. Another train arrival, and then as we see on occasions, it's closely followed by a C Street. So we're still dropping off 400 passengers on C Street. We don't anticipate that changing. But now there's less congestion in town, so it's better able to absorb the impact of the 400 people getting off of the C Street boat. We also have the draw of Fjord Trail, which draws more C Street passengers and other passengers up that way. And as we see with the red people coming from the Metro North, most of them are now coming via the Dockside Park entry, and Fair Street has dropped down to very low levels.
And I can tell you, watching C Street arrivals over the month of October, 11:10 is actually 11:10-ish. I've seen it hit 11:30, 11:40, so that doesn't surprise me that it shows up way there.
Yeah, so now Main Street has dropped down to 65. Still busy, but a lot more comfortable and manageable. Fair Street has dropped down to just 10 in this simulation. Lower Main Street has actually stayed about the same at 50 because we've got kind of a trade-off there. And Dockside Park has actually increased due to the additional people that are moving through on their way to Fjord Trail.
If you've already jotted down a question, could you pass it up so we can start to collect those, please?
There's staff on either end walking down with baskets.
Can we go to the last few? Do you have a couple of slides?
Yeah, well, I think he's got to change the,
Emily.
Got change, great.
Mo's got to change.
Let's get the simulation down and do the last few slides for this presentation, and then we'll take questions.
Okay, so that's the end of the simulation. So what are our key takeaways from all this? Even though Fjord Trail does bring more visitors to the overall region, the impacts of the people that are bound for the trails, including Fjord Trail, are lessened. And how do we do this? We shift the car arrivals to the north parking lots north of Cold Spring. We shift half of the train arrivals to Breakneck. We have a shuttle now that takes people to, between the Metro North stations and their destinations. And we've got improved services with bathrooms, garbage, wayfinding, and sidewalks. Okay, so that's it. Thanks so much. Oh, questions, okay.
So Al, if you stay there, we are going to start drawing questions and feeding them to you. Give us 10 seconds. Everybody stretch. I think this is a management question. All right. First question. Can you hear? Is this loud enough? Okay, great. Can you please tell us more about the benefit or value of evening out the daily visitation, decreasing weekend numbers, but increasing weekday? What's the benefit of trying to do that?
Yeah.
Well, the benefit, and this is, actually, John's going to be addressing this in a bit, so I'll just kind of touch upon the answer to that, is that we want to smooth out the peaks. So there's plenty of capacity during the weekdays, so the more people we can shift from weekends to weekdays, the more comfortable will be the conditions during the weekend days.
But I'll caveat that. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah. I want to caveat that, and back to our three-legged stool, and one of the legs needs to be impact on neighboring communities. We got to find the balance, and part of, I think, what we want to be leaning over my friend MJ's shoulder as something like, this communications campaign to encourage any visitation coming off the weekends. We completely get that there has to be some sense of community, and there is some value in breathing as you come off of a weekend period. So I think there's a balance that we need to land on. So it isn't going to be, I wouldn't recommend in a community environment that everything be mid-attendance level every day of the week, because that doesn't give you that breadth. So, we definitely want to pull off that peaking that happens on the weekend, because that's super challenging for everybody. But we don't want to land where you don't have that sense of being able to just, collect yourselves as a community before you begin to see other visitors coming in. Does that make sense? Great, yep.
All right, I got the next one. Are you ready?
Yeah.
The next question is, what are the peak projections and how much different are they from the medium projections? Can you say
Our
that
peak
again?
projections were a 44% increase over existing conditions compared to 18% for our mid-range projection. So conditions would be worse. Not worse, but more people. But when you look at that, it's a feasible scenario, but one that we think is unlikely. So that's why we plan for the mid-range, because we feel that to be the most likely scenario. But if we do wind up with the high end occurring, then I think the results of the management techniques and the shifting of visitation that we've talked about are going to have the same or more of an impact with potentially higher visitation levels.
Okay, here's a numbers question as we all try to get our minds around what you're sharing. If visits are estimated at 500,000 without the trail in 2033, how, if the trail adds 200,000 visits, did you show a total of 522,000 visits?
Oh, the 522,000 was specifically for Fjord Trail. So we still have visitation that's occurring at the adjacent parks and trails that are not included in that number.
So those numbers are different geographies. They're not sort of the same denominator.
Well, the people that are specifically visiting, say, Dockside Park and Long Dock Park are not in these numbers. So this does not include that total.
Okay, thank you. How do you know how many visits per year each visitor will make, especially non-locals? How are you figuring that out?
Well, we based that a lot on the surveys we conducted last year, where we asked people how many visits they currently made to the Hudson Highlands area, and then with the addition of Fjord Trail and its amenities, how many visits do they think they would make in the future? So we based our visits per person on that analysis, as well as our projection of how visitation would increase for the existing visitors.
Thank you. As you see me setting aside, some of these cards I think are going to be better answered after our next presentation, because we're going to have one other layer of different management tools. So that's coming in just a few minutes. The next card is, my concern is the number of cars and the increased traffic. So this may also go after the next presentation, you can tell me. You said there was a 28% increase in Muir Woods shuttle ridership. Was a new attraction like the Fjord Trail introduced during this time period in Muir Woods?
No, that
just,
was specifically to reduce the roadside parking that was occurring at
Right.
that time. So it's based upon an existing attraction.
Thank you. Did you do a traffic simulation, and can we see it if you did, and if not, why not?
No, we haven't done a traffic simulation. That would be possible, but it just wasn't in our focus for this phase of the analysis.
Oh, no, Mike, this would be a good one for AKRF. I see Mike moving.
So the next phase is.
Mike, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, Mike B. with AKRF. Once this phase is done, what we've been working on is the environmental impact statement, which includes a transportation chapter. That takes this visitation number, converts it to number of new vehicles, adds that to the future traffic to finding out if there's any impacts to local intersections. So I think that's a meeting that's coming up. I think it's scheduled in about a month, maybe. but we're right now wrapping up that study. So you'll see that traffic impact analysis coming up, but it's all based off of the visitation numbers you've seen today, converted to a vehicle number during a peak hour.
So these same visitation numbers.
Will feed in, because that group of people, they either come by train, walk, or by vehicle, and then by vehicle, there's a certain number of people per vehicle, so you could back into, during your peak hour, how many new cars get into the system, and then we add that to the existing network with some growth, and then we'll figure out what the impacts are, but that's coming up, so we're in the process of that right now.
Thank you. We're going to take like 2 more right now, add the next 15-minute presentation, and then we'll do more questions after that. 2023 was an exceptionally wet year. How did you factor this in, because you were collecting data during that time, into your projections for visitation?
Well, we really based it on 2023, but we looked at the visitation for Breakneck Trail, and that changed over the years. So we developed a trend line based upon Breakneck Trail results. But actually, 2023 and 2022 were actually pretty similar. So even though we didn't have the wet conditions in 2022, we still had similar attendance levels. So we started with that as the basis. And we didn't specifically adjust for exceptionally wet conditions.
Okay, thank you. And final one, did future projections of visitation in Cold Spring without Fjord Trail, so that first 2033 one, include impacts of the new parking program? So meters on Main Street, resident permit only streets?
No, we didn't address that as our part of our analysis.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. There are more questions. We will keep going on them after we hear the next piece that John wants to share, because we want to make sure everyone who is here gets to hear all of what we have to offer, and then we'll do more questions and we'll get your input on some things about visitation management.
Thank you, Al. And before you go, I will say, I am on your team that if we're going to present numbers, I say cocktails should be optional. So I love that. So, and to that, I'll just say that that bottle in front of me may or may not have water in it, just for the record. So. All right, so let's get into one of the things as an old operator that I really, really like to get into, which is trying to craft a toolkit that will be effective for the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail. So I wanted to help share with you some of the planning objectives to get into this toolkit development. One is we want to make sure that its goal is to relieve pressure on neighboring communities using a combination of tools and trail operations strategies, and then help visitation to the area function better in local communities and improve the experience of being in the park for both locals and visitors, and then improve capacity to minimize negative impacts. So what negative impacts are currently being experienced? Well, we were able to collect that information from a number of platforms. One was the findings from the Fjord Trails November 2022 visitation workshop and other events. Al mentioned that we had conducted visitor surveys. Maybe you saw the A-frame signs at the trailheads. I think there was one by the Metro North Station in Cold Spring and one up in Long Dock Park. And then feedback from residents shared one-on-one and at small group meetings. And I should ask, do any of you remember, did you ever see me walking around Cold Spring with a clipboard in hand and a clicker? Yeah. So to all of you who saw me, thank you. I mean, because it's odds are I had a conversation with you or peers of yours, and you all were so forthcoming to things that we should really key in on, and that certainly helped to ground us as we went in to this exercise. So to all of you, thank you, because that was all part of the recipe. So what are the existing community challenges? It is inadequate wayfinding, lack of public bathrooms, overflowing garbage, traffic and congestion, limited parking, and then for all of that, not having sufficient staff to manage and maintain it. So to put these strategies together, we group them into three primary categories: operational tools, communication strategies, and partner collaborations. The first two are kind of familiar. You saw akin to it at the beginning of the presentation, where we had direct techniques, the ones meant to be more to regulate behaviors, and those are more the operational tools. Communication strategies is more the indirect techniques, more meaning to influence and encourage certain visitor behaviors. But certainly, because of the proximity of the Fjord Trail to these very special communities, partner collaborations, and also because there are agencies such as C Street, the CTA, and the Metro North, they have to be part of certain conversations. So we'll start to get into these. One is wayfinding signage. And certainly, if we're looking at wayfinding, we're going to make sure that we have sufficient wayfinding to guide pedestrians on the street or in the trail areas, and then also along the roadways. Let's talk about public bathrooms. I think Al teased, looking at dockside, that there would be some additional capacity there. The plans are for 8 stalls each at these locations: Dockside, Little Stony Point, Breakneck, Duchess, Manor, and at Notch. Best part, we said one of the weak links from the current conditions, they will be maintained by Fjord Trail staff. Let's talk about trash collection. So there will be animal-proof trash and recycling receptacles at every trailhead entry, and at other key locations like pull-offs, and again, maintained by Fjord Trail staff. Great. This is one of the key ones, I think, is parking communications. There'll be a number of know before you go tools, which I'll be sharing with you in just a little bit. Information on parking lot locations and space availability will be on the Fjord Trail's proprietary website, their proprietary app, and the digital roadway signage as you come into the Fjord Trail corridor. And certainly a key message included with this is that no Fjord Trail parking is intended in Cold Spring, and then we certainly want to encourage shuttle and train use, again, to pull a lot more of those drivers off the road and to use alternate transportation. And again, this would be managed by Fjord Trail staff. So let's talk about expanded parking. So currently, there are 2 primary lots supporting the Fjord Trail corridor. That's 48 at Washburn and Little Stony Point, and then another 185 the Breckneck Wilkinson area. But that in particular is quite a chaotic parking environment, as we all know. And now, as we move into the full build out for the Fjord Trail, that total parking capacity grows by 365. That means Washburn would grow to 96. That at the Breakneck area, there are multiple lots. Breakneck itself has a couple of divided lots and then some parallel parking along the roadway. And then at Hartsook, there would be lots there, 180 at Duchess Manor, and then 90 up at Notch. But again, that goes to a total of 365. Good news is, respecting the natural space, that it's not one big aggregate mall parking lot in the middle of the trail corridor, that these are strategically placed along the corridor and close to the trailhead entries and to Duchess Manor Visitor Center. There's the shuttle service, which I know you heard about in one of the earlier webinar presentations last year, that will connect all the arrival points, including the parking areas, the train stations, and the trailhead entries along the Fjord Trail from Beacon to Cold Spring, and will reduce traffic and improve pedestrian safety within the Fjord Trail corridor. Also, we've recommended to Drew and his team that as you look at those lots within the heart of the trail, that there is some value in overflowing as one lot fills to capacity, and the ability to leverage those shuttles to act as a ongoing express shuttle that will serve just those lots, and that will encourage more visitors to use that aggregate lot area by having that shuttle service in place to support that unique operation, and again, managed by Fjord Trail staff. Bike-friendly infrastructure, the main path itself is intended to be bike-friendly, but obviously there'll be a need for certain services and amenities, and that are all being developed in the project. This is one of my favorite ones, is how can you leverage technology to facilitate visitation. It was interesting, even before this conversation got started tonight, I know there was, I had a story shared where their daughter-in-law was completely, engrossed in the app that she was using for the area that she was visiting, because she knew that was such a key planning tool. So one of the things that we recommend for the Fjord Trail is that there be a proprietary app that is very robust. That's a one-source tool. Embedded within the app are some really cool features that we want to make sure are in place. One is, if you're going to have a shuttle, one of the worst things if you're standing at a shuttle stop is knowing when's the next shuttle coming, how far away is it. So it's interesting, that's a screenshot from my iPhone when I was out in El Dorado Canyon in Colorado last summer. That's a shuttle service tracker that's already in place. So it shows you where it is physically and an approximate time estimate for the shuttle serving your destination. Then also to the right of that, and also embedded within the Fjord Trail app, would be real-time parking availability. This is an example, I think, from a university campus, but I was witness to this at Manitou Springs in Colorado, where, and in fact, that monument sign to the right, I took that photo. That is as you come into Manitou Springs, another small, very historical, beautiful downtown community area that's been trying to manage their traffic within their downtown space. So, but these two tools will allow visitors to see in real time where is their availability, so it helps them as they come into the space to aim for the parking lot that can support their visit. And I can tell you, when there's a question about traffic impacts, that this is one of the best ways that you can get your arms around traffic impact, is to help people know where there are spaces. Because trust me, I've been in the village, and I've been watching washrooms at capacity, and all that circulating behavior goes away because you have this information made available to your audience. So strategies for changing patterns, we'll talk about when, shifting people to arrive in a non-peak period instead of the peak periods. And we just had a conversation that you got to find the nuance, you got to find the balance. Where, shifting people from one busy place to a quieter one, and you have 7.5 miles to work with, there are ample opportunities to support that. How many, controlling the number of people allowed in one area at a specific time frame, and that's kind of and in case of emergency thing, when the attendance gets super busy, ultimately, what do you need to do to be able to regulate attendance? And that's kind of what we face with Muir Woods. At what point do you have to start regulating the flow? So I'll just briefly touch on this about the flattening of the curve. It is, there is value in pulling off that peak. Where I can foresee the Fjord Trail landing isn't trying to push just this generic volume of visitation across the week. There is, the dynamics of a community environment that, welcome some breathing time. So again, this is part of, I think, the planning process is where do we want to go with the campaign so that we strike that balance. And in this case here, this is a live example from Fredericksburg, Texas, another small town example. They put a lot of focus of encouraging off-peak visitation. Same thing to kind of really start to pull away those increasing crowds on the weekends. And they would speak to the merits of coming during a non-peak time, the ease of parking, the beauty of being able to explore, whether it be a trail or whether it be their downtown area, where they can only focus on the surroundings and not their safety or the crowds or anything like that. Greater availability and access to food service, bathrooms, all of that. Before the Fjord Trail goes into the fall foliage season, we really want to make sure that they have a really robust know before you go campaign, that we want to make sure that the audience is aware of better times and locations to attend, to improve their experience, which is code for also, making it less crowded on those super busy days, leveraging a lot of those tools like the apps and the website and all of that to spotlight that information. And I can tell you as an example, if it's going into a super peak like that third weekend of October, you can do a blast notification on an app just to say, friendly reminder, the approaching weekend is very, very busy. We encourage you to come on an alternate day. That's an example of how you can use those tools. Hi.
John, hi. In a couple minutes, we'd love to shift to some questions.
Great,
Just in-
perfect.
So people should start writing.
So as you have questions, start jotting them down, and just an invitation
Yeah.
to move through.
Yes, I've never gotten the hook in my life. I promise I'm not going to get it this time. So I'll just briefly mention, Al touched upon this before. The heart of the trail, we really want the visitors coming into the trail to focus on the experience beginning in that area where we have the largest amount of parking available, the greatest amount of amenities available, the improved breakneck station, and of course the visitor center itself, ideal for new or long-time returning visitors. Super busy periods when we know we have full train arrivals, we see value in having greeters, volunteers positioned at the train platform so that the people coming off the train don't organically all march to Breakneck Trailhead, that we want to be able to disperse them to Wilkinson and to Nenham Extension. There's some value in having those greeters to encourage the visitors spreading themselves out. We want to encourage exploration of all 4 Fjord Trail ecological zones. I don't know how many people know that there are 4 distinct ecological zones within this corridor. We feel for people to really experience the natural environment that they should be encouraged to visit more. And we talked about capacity. That is all that capacity that's waiting to be used by encouraging people to spread out further along the trail. So I know Al had shown this slide here. We have conditioned where park users typically arrive later, trail users arrive earlier. So we want to look at being able to use tools such as programming at Dutchess Manor and select trail entries to kind of flip that, or at least to balance it so that you're pulling off of those peaks during the day. And then there are a few things that I talked about, partner collaborations. These are things that are going to require some additional conversations. And these are certainly recommendations that Orca is making and not necessarily anything that's definitive. We encourage that there be increased service to Breakneck Ridge. We think if we can see the results of pushing more people to the heart of the trail, that zone, that you're going to get sustained demand at the Breakneck platform to justify having some additional service there and pulling it off of the Cold Spring platform. That we recognize that ultimately it may be necessary, in a worst case environment where you have to ultimately control entries into your trailhead, entries in your parking lot, in order to manage that demand. So we know that it is a partnered conversation because, there are multiple agencies that have to be involved in this conversation. From Orca's point of view, that needs to be on the table. And then we did see just the negative impact of having those double train arrivals from 10 to 12 a.m. during the fall foliage season on the weekends and holidays. That's rough. That's all dumping into those sidewalks of Cold Spring. We recommend that conversations occur to get that back to the normal 1 per hour. If there's a demand for wanting to still come, they'll either come to an earlier train or a later train. And then finally, we encourage that there be conversations to move the C Street's arrival to outside of that high demand period of 10 to noon. Come before 10, come after noon, for example. And that's a win-win. It would take pressure off the downtown area in Cold Spring. And for the C Street visitors, they would have a much more relaxing visit within the village. Finally, for exploration, we want to incentivize carpooling and public transit use, not only for visitors, but also even for Fjord Trail staff and volunteers taking more cars off the road. Next steps. So we're going to continue to revise this toolkit that we have now introduced as a conceptual bucket to our friends at the Fjord Trail. And obviously there will be additional research and some new information that may require some modification. Looking at a rollout date in late 2026, and certainly going back to that cycle that we talked about, that they'll evolve based on changing operational conditions.
Thank you. Perfect.
All right, and that's it.
If you would remain there, we
Yes,
have
ma'am.
some questions for you. I think this one we are seeing in a few different cards. It might be one of the pressing ones on people's minds. If visitation estimates prove to be wrong, how and when will corrective measures be taken?
Well, I will tell you as an operator, and I'm going to put my Drew hat on for a moment, that out of the gate, that one, and Drew and I have already talked this, that we have to be studying the visitation as soon as it comes, and I know that I think many of the trailheads within the Fjord Trail Corridor, if I'm speaking correctly, now have data counters, visitation counters that allow them to see these numbers. So I will tell you from my experience in opening venues that you course correct right away. I mean, you want to make sure you're always on top of your operation. So the process typically is that each day, you'll do a debrief with each other. You'll find out, where are the pain points? Where do we need to shift some strategies? It's very changing, but ultimately, operationally, you always have to understand that you're in control and accountable for the space. So the shorter answer is immediately.
Thank you. There are several questions about costs. And what will be the cost of maintaining restrooms, emptying trash receptacles, et cetera? Where does that money come from? Who's going to pay for the shuttle? And I don't know if somebody is able to take that.
This may not be.
That's a me one.
Hi,
So,
Amy.
Amy.
as I said in the beginning, we're an independent nonprofit, so we'll be fundraising. And so that whole plan of the operations, again, we're 2.5 years out from having to operate, but we're obviously looking at our staffing, the costs that will be required. As design development goes to construction, the landscape architects provide us with detailed understanding of what will be needed to maintain the landscape that they've planned, like watering needs, weeding needs, et cetera. So that will be built out, and then we will be fundraising and funding that ourselves. The shuttle, one of our main revenue sources is charging for parking in those lots, and then that helps subsidize the shuttle operation.
Thank you. I was just about to read you a question about any plans for charging for parking. There
Done.
you go.
Yeah, so I will tell you that, and there's a lot of models that have been out there in communities where the parking rates are also used as a tool to influence visitation. I mean, even within the village, as I understand the latest plans for parking, that there is some accelerated parking rates as you get past a certain threshold that times will peak. I think just in the spirit of that, there is value in rewarding or incentivizing coming during an off-peak period by setting parking rates that are different than the peak period. So those definitely are part of the conversations going in right now. They should not be excluded. I mean, we've got plenty of evidence that indicate that approach works well, both within municipalities and also in park areas as well.
Perfect. Somebody had just asked, would it be free on weekdays or for locals? So
Yeah.
Well, thinking like you.
I will tell you that ultimately it's going to be at the Fjord Trails call. We've thrown a few models at them. And, to me, I think one of the things I'm most concerned about, how can I pull off weekends in October? And that may be, one of those opportunities to be able to do that, but it is all an active conversation right now. But I won't say that that's off the table. We just have to know of when it makes sense to be able to do that, because back to the earlier conversation about how do you then fund operating shuttle systems and managing and all of that. Some of that is that balance of parking revenue. Yep.
Thank you. Since Breakneck Station already exists, essentially, why are more people going to go there? Why will half of the projected Metro North riders go there? What's going to change? Breakneck Station will not be improved to draw more people than already stop there, or is there some plan
So,
to change something?
can I take this one?
Sure.
So it is improved. It's going to be, right now, it's those 2 yellow staircases. It's hard for them to deboard that many people. So when we've already started the conversation with Metro North, and we've got 2 years again to figure this out. But would they expand service, stop more trains there? They really, right now, there's very poor north to south stoppage. It only does that in the afternoon because they're focused on the city. We want to encourage them to think about that as more of a station. I think they are eager to, once those improvements are made. It's been sort of a outlier within their system in terms of service and infrastructure, and that'll be vastly improved. So they might add trains that stop there. Maybe they would consider going into a Friday and dropping at Breakneck on a Friday. So it's that ability to deboard more people because of the platforms that will be there and enhance the service and maybe even the days of the service. So that's all an active conversation, and we know that people locally have said often that they'd like to see more people go straight to Breakneck, so that's what we're working on.
And there's so many Mike and Sue and Andy scenarios where their experience is best executed at that station. Say if you're a biker, and you want to come to bike the trail, that it's a lot more efficient for me to, if I'm coming up from the city with my bike, to arrive at Breakneck and then hit the trail from there versus having to come into the Cold Spring platform and then make my way into the trail for biking. So yeah, there's definite advantages.
Perfect. I'm really sorry. There are more questions, but we want to ask for your input on something before we know some people have to go. We hope you will stay after this, but if you give us about 10 more minutes, thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
More conversations to be had, I know.
Yeah, thanks.
We would like to invite you, as you are able, to pull out your phone. We're going to use something called Mentimeter. And the first step is to check your service. So, sorry? And will you come up to Abby if you would like?
You come after, sorry, just,
You wanna do it after?
come
Okay.
after the meeting, yeah.
Okay, we will do it that way. So, check if you have service, check if you have bars. If you do not have bars, get onto the Wi-Fi. So the network is called HHFT Guest. It should appear on your Wi-Fi. The password, can you see the password in the back? Or should I read it slowly? I will read it. The password, when you get to your Wi-Fi, is all caps HHFTP at, the little at symbol, number 55, lowercase WORD. So that's the password. So hopefully people are seeing bars or some kind of service. We think it should be much better than last time. And just continue to dance with us. This just takes a minute and it's very cool when it goes. So can you nod or raise your hand if you're still not quite there? Most people think they're on, okay. We're gonna ask you to go to this website. So you can either type in www.menti.com, or you can take a photograph. If you pull up your camera and try to get that, it should pull up a website. If you get to the website by typing it in, you'll want to type in the code number that's written on the left, 59804129. So once you get to the right site, it will says something like, thanks for being here, hang tight. We're gonna let people get there. Great. So we're gonna give you a minute to get to that, and then we're gonna ask you a series of questions about visitation. The password, the Wi-Fi password, I'll tell you the code for the Menti, for those who are there, is 59804129. And the Wi-Fi, one more time. I'm going back. I know this is a little bit bumpy, but just give it a sec. It's gonna be okay. The password is capital HHFTP @ 55 lowercase WORD. And we are gonna launch this. So
Mo, could you go to my laptop, please?
Mo is gonna switch us over to Abby's laptop to run this. So you'll see a series of options. Choose the one or ones that apply, and you have to scroll to the bottom and hit submit. The code to join again. Do we have the code to join? Can we pull it up? We don't have it in front of us.
59. Come up to
can't-
us after. Okay.
All right, so you should be able to choose where you live and then hit submit. You have to scroll to the bottom to hit submit to be sure it's entering.
Okay, we have 50, 60.
All right, let's go to the next. Oh, good, somebody got it.
Oh, yeah, it's on
It
the
says
top.
it up
Here.
there. Yes, thank you. All right, which of the following parks and trails have you visited in the past year? Check as many as apply. Well, we want to make sure we get this before people leave, so we're gonna know it's a total tension. I want you to. Let's try. I'm fine with me.
Okay.
All right, let's go to the next question. Thank you, everyone. Oh, still coming in, still coming in. It's so fun to see. Thank you. Next question. How often have you visited the parks and trails within Hudson Highlands State Park Preserve during the past year?
Within the whole preserve.
In the whole preserve. Thank you.
There were a number of trails that weren't listed on the previous.
Right. Any trails in the, right.
For this one.
So how did they, like, this question is.
Why were those trails chosen? I don't know the answer to that question. The ones before were specific ones.
The parks and trails.
How often? We have a little more open time with John for Q&A for anyone who wants to after this. Can we do like 10 more minutes? Can we do 10 more minutes of open?
Doing the 20 minutes of window.
But they wanted to do a few more collective questions. That seems okay to me.
Anna, can I move us along?
We can say if anyone wants 10, we'll do 10 more minutes specifically. Is that okay with John?
Oh, completely.
Yeah, I'm just worried about.
We'll let other people come up.
I think we have full people.
Next one, thank you.
Pass your bottle of Pellegrino.
Which tools will be the most helpful in improving congestion in Cold Spring? Choose 3, or up to 3. Oh, the code to get back in? The code to get back in is 59804129. Check. Still seeing responses. We'll give it another few seconds.
Moving.
All right. I think, it's still coming. The blue one.
The blue one is new wayfinding signage. which
New
is the
wayfinding
lowest.
signage is falling short. As is promotion of public transportation. No, they're not doing the survey. We're not, none of the staff side people are doing the survey. How important do you think timed entry or a parking reservation system could be in controlling congestion at popular trailheads like Breakneck? Looks like very important is the answer to this one. And so many thumbs up. It's very satisfying. All right. Thank you. All right. As a local, what would encourage you to visit this visitor center that is going to be right where we are? There are a series of things. I think you can choose as many as you would like.
You're not listing more presentations.
All-night presentations.
That's adult programming.
Oh, okay, got it.
Will there be bathrooms here? I'm sure, yes. Yes, there will be bathrooms here. It's a very concrete thing to draw people in. Oh, I love it. Is that the last one? Let's go to, we have one more question. Which of the following are important to you? And I believe you can select as many as you wish for this one. I'll give people a minute or two more, and then I'll read out the ones that are coming up here. All right, we've got fewer people walking along 9D is our pink one here. Reduce traffic and congestion on Village of Cold Spring streets, that's the orange. And the green is being able to walk, bike, and or use a wheelchair safely along the river. So those are coming out on top there. And I believe that is all. Thank you for that piece. Thank you all. Good job with the tech. For those who didn't manage to do it on the phone, if you want to come up, we're happy to take your answers and fold them in. There was a request for a few more minutes of open conversation, so we'll do like 5 or 7 more minutes together for anyone who wants to. And then our staff are just going to stay. So feel free to hang out if you want to take a bathroom break and come back and chat.
Just hang.
That's great. But can you be quiet for just a few more minutes if you are standing up, and we will take a few more questions here. The first one I want to take, John, do you mind popping up again?
Sure.
This may or may not work. We're going to try. Is emergency services and first aid stations and ambulance services, what do we know about those kind of services for Fjord Trail?
So not built into, for a visitation management strategy, but I think, Drew, you have some input on this? Hi, Drew.
Ooh, emergency services, here we go.
All right. I think that's a fairly general question. We're going to work closely with local first responders and provide our own capacity, work with New York State Parks on emergency response. So, we're essentially gonna add to the current capacity, but by providing our own rangers on the trail that are able to help to support the state park personnel and, support local first responders.
Okay,
And
thank you.
Drew, if I could add in there as well, there have been improvements to the upper overlook area at Breakneck, and since then, I believe that there's been fewer rescues that occurred because the improvements have actually allowed visitors to see where they're supposed to go a little bit more clearly than previously. So there's already been improvement in that condition as we start to take a look at improving it and making sure that pedestrians know exactly where they're going.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we've had preliminary, again, we're kind of in early days, discussions with that we would offer some sort of an annual stipend to the local departments. We might help purchase some equipment that if they need that specifically to make a rescue or help out on Fjord. So that site access, we would partner with them on that. So it's additional staff capacity on the ground. Like Evan right now, if there's a lost or injured hiker, he pulls them off the mountain and delivers them to the waiting local responders. So in a similar model, our staff would be helping people on the trail and getting them out to the emergency responders. So it's extra capacity.
Can I give
And
you
I can
another-
speak a little bit more to that, just in terms of my experiences. I'll be the park director for the Fjord Trail. I was previously a wilderness EMT and have worked extensively, as a park ranger and doing rescues. So I'm interested in having a robust capacity to respond and help local responders.
Thank you. Will the shuttles be free? Would the shuttles be free?
Go ahead, Amy.
We might have different answers. One consultant and the early consultant for the shuttle route did recommend free. We've discussed free or low cost, right?
Yes, and also, one of the models is if you pay to park, they shouldn't be double dinged by also having to pay for the shuttle. So there would just need to be tools in place on board the shuttle so that the driver can recognize that the person boarding has already paid for parking, and then they would be able to travel for free, particularly when we talked about overflow parking around the breakneck area to encourage use of those overflow lots by having a shuttle that can make that circuit and bring people back to breakneck. That certainly you didn't want to get their experience off to a bad start by double dipping on the cost of using that service. Yep.
Thank you. There are several questions that are kind of parking related, and I'm not sure if that's going to come to you in the future, but there's a question about entrance for like 9D south of Cold Spring, and that there's still just one 9D if cars are coming in to park partway through, and how sort of is there a plan for keeping people from parking, say, at Food Town? Is that a restaurant? A grocery store? Thank you. Okay.
Well, again, that speaks to the value of having the real-time parking availability. Everybody should know where they can park. And I, as a visitor, if you have a tool available to me to where I know where there is a space that's either at my desired destination or that's at a lot where I can then pick up a shuttle to then use it to get to my desired step-off point, then that's what I'm going to follow. I know they had a question. I
want to do one final question, which I think is a very pointed one that people really want to understand.
Sure.
And I think and then we'll stop this part so everyone can just chat informally. Do you think that adding this walkway along the Hudson River, starting in Cold Spring, is going to alleviate overcrowding in the village? Like, what's your sense of that?
So I'll speak to it operationally. I'll speak to it quantitatively if you want. But I think coming in after having spent the last year, and again, I was grounded with the volume of visitation that was along the sidewalks of Cold Spring, and then I was also privy to what it looked like on 9D with these people that were walking along 9D because they wanted to get to Breakneck, but there was no more parking available. Absolutely. I mean, I think the opportunity to improve, this gets back to one of the core genesis reasons for this trail, which still makes perfect sense, is to pull that unsafe behavior off of the roadway and along the riverside. I think also, I come from operations that speak to inclusivity. I think there's been an audience that's been denied an opportunity to recreate because of the trails require a level of fitness, a level of mobility that not all members of the community are able to achieve. So I think having more level grade ADA opportunities, I think for the audience, is going to encourage more use of the trail. So to me, I think, ultimately being an empath and wanting to have a space that's available for everyone, I really love that feature of the Fjord Trail.
And I think a lot of people in Cold Spring are looking for an additional activity. So a lot of people will decide to go ahead and do an add-on experience by experiencing the trail, and there's lots of beautiful viewscapes along the way. So that'll draw a lot of people in Cold Spring over there.
We'll put a specific example that these guys have raised is the C Street people. They get dropped off for 4 hours. By 3 hours in, they've eaten lunch and seen all the shops they're interested in, and then they wind up kind of milling around. So it's just this kind of milling, right? And that's just crowding, usually around the waterfront and in dockside, right? Because they're waiting they don't want to miss the boat when it comes back. This would give them a space to walk, that they still feel like they're close enough to see the boat coming, and gives them an extra hour of something to do while they wait for the boat. That gets them out of the village. And so it kind of takes away some of that latent congestion.
Yeah, and I know you all have seen it if you've been like 3 to 4. Every day that we saw the visitor behaviors around the C Street gets to 3 o'clock and they all hang. And to the point that, they aren't aware of, or there isn't anything that's right fit for them to be able to fill that additional time. So again, that speaks to the ability to support that audience. Hi.
Perfect, thank you. Amy, do you want to mention next steps? And then we will adjourn and everyone can keep chatting.
So we always love to talk. So we'll all stay here for around 20 minutes just to take any more questions if you want to come up and ask us questions directly. We're also always monthly at Hubbard Lodge for chats, so you can always stop in. That format is it's a 2-hour window. You can come, you don't have to stay the whole 2 hours, but if you want to come, ask 3 questions and then go back to the rest of your weekend, that's great. And then like I said at the beginning, when the public comment period opens for the environmental review, we'll be, shouting it from the rooftop so everyone's aware and can see that document. There'll be copies put at the, town and village halls, the libraries for paper copies, and then I believe it's made available online by state parks. But we'll give all those details to you so you're aware. Okay?
Thank you, Amy. Thank you everyone so much for being here. We will post the recording on the website. Tell your friends and neighbors if they missed it and would be interested. Thank you. Have a wonderful night. Hope you stay dry getting home.